Good morning, everyone. So glad to have you on this morning. You are joining us for the chat session on the This Way Network, and we've got Mia Pyle with us this morning. Good morning, Rodney.
Hey, good morning.
Rodney,
And this is
there
part
you go.
two. This has been,
Yeah,
yes, this is part two. And we are back with Mia Pyle. And this is incredible pain unwasted here on the This Way
amen.
Network. Good morning. Good morning, Nina. Good morning, Mia. And it's good to be back with you guys.
Good to be back with you too. And good morning, Carrie. I noticed you've
My
joined us this
guys, I
morning.
called
I'm
you
sure
guys.
others
I
are
called
getting
you guys.
on. Jacqueline. What?
I called you guys. I meant ladies. I said, it's good to be back with you guys. You're not guys. You're ladies. What am I doing? But anyway, good to be back. I'm glad you guys are back.
You know what? I don't think we even noticed. Yeah,
I
not
know.
not bad at all. We're fine. We're fine.
Yeah.
So,
and
let's see here. Oh, I was trying to get my notes up here. So the exciting thing about this is we had Mia on, 2 weeks ago, 3 weeks, something like that. And our discussion was so good, so intense that the 30 minutes just zoomed by.
It did.
And we didn't even get close to covering everything we wanted to cover. There was just so much to talk about. So we invited Mia back as soon as she could get here and as soon as we could have her here. And we've got a full hour this morning. And we are super excited because hopefully that means we can, scratch the surface at least of the things that we want to talk about. And in particular, we want to talk about mental health and spirituality.
Wow.
So, yes. So, Mia, one of the things that you sent me some notes,
Right.
okay? And I was so glad you did because I wanted to make sure we covered everything that, Rodney and I can ask questions, but we don't know what it's really necessary to cover like you do. So we're so grateful that you sent me some notes so that we could make sure we stayed on topic and covered the things that needed to be covered. And the first one you had in your notes was addressing toxic beliefs. Tell me more about that.
Oh man, this is so good. And I just want to say thank you so much, Nina and Rodney, for having me back on the show. And just a big warm hello to the viewers who are here, those who will be here later watching the replay. It is so awesome that we engage in conversations about what we believe and our mental health, right? Our spirituality and mental health. And Nina, when we think about that idea, I love this phrase. What you get to believe what you want, but what you believe has power over you. Right?
Yes.
You get to believe what you want, but what you believe has power over you. And another way to put it is what you believe matters. Right? What you believe matters. And so for those of you who may be meeting me for the first time, I definitely grew up. Well, actually, I didn't grow up as a faith-based person. However, later in my young adult years, I became a missionary, traveled to over 12 countries, saw many people baptized. I mean, it was amazing to work on schools and hospitals and clinics being built for people that were in need, of water and resources and medication. And yet, as an adult, after all those amazing experiences, I found myself in a behavioral health hospital. I found myself in a blue jumpsuit, not sure that I even believed in God or believed it was worth it to live. And as I went on this health journey, which I believe we all are on, right? I saw that what I believe actually matters. What I believe about God, what I believe about myself, what I believe about prior experiences, it really matters. And it mattered to my mental health. And it was a huge reason why I had become mentally unstable. Right?
Yeah.
Right.
So you feel like your spirituality in particular played a part in becoming, or maybe lack of spirituality, which doesn't seem to make sense since you were doing all this mission work. So
Right.
what was it you were believing that led you in that direction?
Well, one huge one that I think will resonate with people is being healed by God and being used by God are two different things.
Mhm.
Being
Right.
used by God and being healed by God are actually two different things. And if we
Mhm.
may, so talking about spirituality, so some of us have experienced where we see amazing spiritual leaders doing wonderful things, right? Then
Right.
later
Right.
we hear, oh my goodness, did you hear in the news about this particular leader is doing this
Mhm.
in the background? Or
Mhm.
I can't
Yeah.
believe that this leader that we all looked up to and we loved and we admonished is
Mhm.
now over here. And I can't believe this happened. I'm not giving any
Mhm.
specifics because it really
Sure.
applies to so many things, right? And
Right,
Right.
right.
and we see
But basically, we see them as, oh, they fell. They're
right.
fallen. You know, yeah.
Mhm.
We held them on this pedestal. We held them in high esteem, and now they've
Mhm.
fallen off our pedestal because they're engaged in something that, we thought they wouldn't be struggling with because we thought everything they were
Mm.
teaching us would keep them, above that.
Well, that's what the children of Israel believed about Moses,
Mm.
right? And when we
Mm-hmm.
look in the Bible, Moses
Mm.
was called to be the deliverer of the people from the Egyptians. Yet he's supposed to take them out of Egypt into the land of Canaan. But in the end, he himself is not allowed to go. Why? Because he strikes a rock, right?
Mm-hmm.
And
Mm-hmm.
for those who
Mm.
love to study the Bible like I do, when you go back and look,
Mm.
Moses had a pattern. And we're talking about mental health,
Mhm.
right? Mental health has to do a lot
Mhm.
with patterns that we can recognize. Moses had a pattern of having a temper tantrum. Remember? Like when we go back,
Oh,
Oh.
yeah.
he killed somebody, right? In
Mm-hmm.
anger.
Mm-hmm.
And when you look at it, the Bible says he looked left and right and then he killed that person. So that was premeditation,
Mhm.
right? We see
Right.
him all throughout the there's different places where he's given the 10 commandments. He sees the people doing something wrong, which makes sense. But the 10 commandments were sacred to the people of God. He throws them down, right? He
Mm-hmm.
destroys the
Mm-hmm.
first set. So some people look at them like, oh, righteous indignation, that makes sense. But that who says that that's what God wanted him to do with something holy he had just given him? And so that's what I mean by being
Mm.
healed by God versus being used by God. And so God used Moses mightily to do amazing miracles, signs, and wonders. But sometimes, and even if you're watching this today and you're like, I'm not spiritual or
Mhm.
I'm not really religious, you can still see this idea in the workplace where
Mhm.
leaders, right, are being
Mhm.
used
Mm-hmm.
mightily. They're increasing the
That's
bottom
right.
line. They're amazing with customer
Mm-hmm.
service. They are doing all the things, and yet in their private life, things are falling apart. And maybe some of their friends and
Mm.
associates are even surprised to see when they crash or when they die by
Mm-hmm.
suicide.
Right.
And
Right.
so,
Mm-hmm.
Right.
so that was a belief that I had, that just because God is using me mightily in the mission field and I'm doing these amazing
Mhm.
things, that all the trauma that I had
Mhm.
experienced in the past
Mm-hmm.
must not be an issue, because look at all
Yeah.
that he's doing to use me. So it wasn't that I was living a
Mhm.
double life, Nina or
Mm.
Rodney. I'm not,
Yeah.
in the front and then in the back, doing something different. But I had unresolved trauma. And a lot of people,
Right.
especially post COVID, they have
Mhm.
experienced so much trauma. And yet the idea
Right.
is just, all right, let's get on with life. And
Mm-hmm.
we think
Mhm.
that because we're able to go to work and because we're able to send the
Yeah.
kids to school and
Right.
do our routines again, that, oh, I must be fine.
Yeah,
Right.
now that things are fine, I'm fine, but you're not
Right.
really. And let me just remind our viewers, the trauma that
Mhm.
you went through in your family was that your sister had been kidnapped. Do I
Yes.
remember that correctly?
Yes, that's right.
Right.
So, and
And
y'all can only imagine
that's right.
what that
Mhm.
would be like for the family that is wondering, will she ever come back home? Will she be okay? What's going to happen?
Right.
Mhm.
And then even after she does come home, and she
Yes.
did come home, right?
Yes.
Even
Yes.
after that happens, you're still wondering, well, what if that happens again? Am I safe?
Right.
What if that happens to one of us? So
Absolutely.
that is a lot of
Absolutely.
trauma. Now, one thing I think is
Mm.
important to note here, though, is a lot of times we tend to say, oh, well, I haven't gone through anything like that. No
Right.
one in my family has been
Mhm.
kidnapped, and
Right.
yet we all, I think,
Yes.
suffer traumas.
Mhm.
at
Absolutely.
times. And sometimes we're suffering an ongoing trauma that,
Hmm.
may not seem like a big deal because we're living it every day, but emotional abuse, mental abuse, um, even physical abuse for some people,
Hmm.
the trauma of just having, a conscience that tells you, I am constantly doing things that God isn't happy with.
Mm.
So,
Mia,
to me, go ahead,
Mia,
Rodney.
one I was thinking last time you were on, Mia, you were talking about you were on a trip and then you saw a person and then they were carrying some bricks and the bricks fell and then in different cultures and even not even in different cultures, even in America, families all across the nation, certain things happen in certain families and people automatically jump to, oh, they must have done something or something must have
Mhm.
come back around or it was karma, and you hear people talk these things, and I think like you know God wills what he will. And a lot of times people don't understand the Lord's ways are so much higher. I mean, when you get to heaven and you can ask him, why did this happen? It will be crystal clear why certain things happen, why certain things were allowed. And a lot of people, they really lose their faith when they go through a trial. And that's a tough thing when someone goes, he was the nicest guy or she was the nicest person and this happened. Why would God allow that?
Mhm.
Those are questions that many people ask, but at the same time, you're talking about mental health, and like I
Mhm.
said, a lot of times people, uh, if they don't have the correct biblical knowledge, they things can turn around really quick, and then that your religion can or your faith can actually work against your mental stability. And so,
Yes.
this is very interesting, but a lot of
Yeah.
times people don't realize that you know um, these things that happen in life, sometimes they're meant to mold us, to make us stronger,
Mhm.
and tests are not meant to break. They're meant to it's just like when you make a pot, you put it in the kiln to make it solid. So
Mhm.
a lot of
To
people
temper
wonder.
it, yeah.
That's right.
And I think that's what I was trying to get at, Rodney, was that
Hmm.
sometimes the trauma that we've been going through actually
Hmm.
is the belief, and sometimes it's the wrong belief that
Mm-hmm.
every wrong
Exactly.
thing that happens to us is somehow our
Hmm.
fault,
Hmm.
or that we feel the burden like it's our fault somehow that the things that are happening in society are somehow
Right.
personally our fault because of
Hmm.
choices we made or whatever. And then, of course, there's the trauma of when that really did happen. When you
Right.
actually did make a choice that ended up bad for you. And worse to me is when you end up making a choice that you realize actually harmed someone else and the
Wow.
grief you feel over that. So all of these things together, that is a lot. I don't think any of us escapes that trauma.
Well, this is really
And Mia,
juicy.
one quick question. Mia, I have one quick question. Should we really work on forgiving ourselves? I think a lot of times what carries things on, even if you fall, if you make a mistake, once you get past it, a lot of times people can't forgive themselves. Is that a form of mental abuse on yourself?
Man, I'm so glad you asked that because that actually brings me into another thought. Like when we're talking about spirituality, right? And how what we
Hmm.
believe matters, right? What we believe, it really matters. And so, absolutely, we
Hmm.
should be able to forgive ourselves and have self-compassion to answer your question directly. But this is how
Hmm.
that can be that for many people, self-compassion and forgiveness of self and even forgiveness of others can be a stumbling block, because what if I believe myths about forgiveness that actually cause me to forgive, however, keeps me in a toxic situation? Or
Mm,
I think I
Mm.
haven't forgiven when I actually have because I'm basing it on my feelings. And allow me to give some examples. And so, one, forgiveness. There's a story of a lady that's told. She's married. She was married, and her husband would have an affair, and then he would be caught, and she would confront him on it, and he would ask for forgiveness. She would forgive him, and then he'd do it again, and she'd forgive him, and then he'd do it again, and she'd forgive him, and then he'd do it again. And so this time she put him out, and he goes to their pastor, and he's like, listen, I did fall. I want to be forgiven. My wife's put me out. So then the pastor, he talks to the wife and says, you need to forgive him like God forgave you. God died on the cross for you. You should be willing to forgive him like he's forgiven you, like God has forgiven you. Do unto others, right? And so she forgives him, and then she lets him back into the house. Well, obviously he does it again and again and again. And then she puts him out again, goes back to the pastor, same thing. And this is a true story. Okay. And unfortunately, it happens more often than people want to admit. And so he goes, and he's like, once again, God, 70 times 70, right? That's a scripture. It talks about how often should you be willing to forgive a person. 70 times 70, the Lord has died for you. We have to be willing to forgive. So ultimately she goes to counseling. And in counseling, she learned this vital truth. Remember, what you believe matters. It really matters. Forgiveness is different from behavior. I can forgive you, but that doesn't mean you've earned my trust, right? So you can sincerely be sorry, but that doesn't mean you have worked on the skills to be found trustworthy. You have not invested in what it takes to become a trustworthy person. You have not worked to earn my trust, right? And so just because I forgive you does not mean that the relationship, and that's a myth. Some people think that because I forgive a person, the relationship has to return to the way that it was. But that's not always possible, because people trust. Marriage is not just about I feel good and I love you and I'm here thick and thin, but it's about trust. It's a huge foundation in marriage. So if the trust relationship has been broken, someone has to be, the person breaking that has to be willing to engage in what it takes to be found trustworthy, which means they have inner work and healing to do. Why am I going out and having affairs? What is it inside of me that's causing me to go out, and not be lazy and think, oh, it's just because I'm a sinner, because that can be a lazy response that, oh, I'm a sinner and God, I just need him to forgive me. No, that's actually spiritual laziness. There are deeper roots and tentacles that can be identified as to why I have this behavior. Why am I doing it? What's causing me to do it? How can I overcome this? Just like a person who is on drugs can overcome being an addict or having an addiction, this can happen with that, right? And so that's a huge one with forgiveness. That lady that kept forgiving now is spiritually confused, because she's like, God, I do forgive him, but I'm supposed to keep bringing him back into my home to give me a disease, to expose my children to this type of lifestyle because I forgive them in the name of God. How is this healthy? How does this make sense? And so we find that Jesus says, don't throw your pearls before swine. So rightly balancing these truths and these understandings so that we are not in a situation that makes us unhealthy in every way.
Yeah, and I think we could also point out that God himself has given us an example in his own relationship with Israel, because he says that Israel is his bride, his wife, okay? And yet when she was unfaithful to him over and over and over and over again, God says, oops, I give you a bill of divorcement. And then he says, and I'm going to shut you up in this valley with only a door of hope in it, and so that you will not be able to run after the things that you ran after before. Basically, in my mind, it's like God is putting Israel in a situation where he's like, no, you have to go and get this issue resolved. You have to get this taken care of. You have to have a change of heart and mind and do the work
Mia,
before I can let you come back out that door of hope.
Mia, I have a question. A lot of times, what you just described, where the lady was forgiving the person, what do you do in a situation where either one or the other, male or female, they have some kind of problem, communication problem, and they really truly are the problem? Like this gentleman was the problem,
Mm-hmm.
but he won't go and seek help. At some
Right.
point, I understand, you have to call it quits at some point, or you have to set some kind of guideline. I really believe the Lord, at some point, after you've had cognizant, conversation with somebody, said, hey, listen, let's sit down. This makes 3 times that I have forgiven you. You said you weren't going to do it, and you can't use that, 70 times 7 on me. I do forgive you, but the problem is not me forgiving you or not forgiving you. It's the problem with you having this problem, this spiritual breakdown on your side. So are you going to go get counseling? Are you going to go change your ways? How do you deal with a situation like that where the person has done the godly thing and said, okay, I'm going to forgive you. I'm trying to keep the family together. But the problem is you need to correct it. How do you deal with that?
Right. So that one's loaded. And I'm so glad that you asked that question. One thing I want to bring in is the idea of principles, right? Because what I love about principles is that's what you find in the Bible. A lot of times as believers, I see in the work that I do with others, and many people will tell you this, that sometimes as believers, we're reading biblical principles as direct. This is exactly it. I must let this happen 70 times 70 before I make a move or make an
Right.
action. But that was a principle that was there, not a specific, you got to let this happen 140, or how, you know what I'm saying? But there
Right.
was a principle
Yeah.
there. Even with the door of hope that Nina's bringing out so beautifully, there's a principle there. You see, because God knows how each and every brain is made, processed, how we do things, how we're going to do things. And for one person, one affair is all that they need to allow to transpire, right? Whereas another
Right.
person, they may have there is a different command on their life. There is a different thing that God is producing in them, right? And so I want to answer that question by saying, let's look for principles of health. Let's look, because principles of health are biblically based, right? True principles. And so one principle of health is the idea of boundaries. And you said it, right? So a boundary,
Right.
like if a person is in a relationship and there's someone that is practicing something that is unhealthy and unsafe, like an affair, right? Then this
Right.
person has the ability to erect boundaries that keep them safe, that keep them healthy, but also allow them to make decisions as to what is going to be best for the family. I can give a boundary by saying, hey, you can come this further and no more, which may look like, in order for this relationship to work, these are the things I'm going to need from you. That's a boundary, right? Because why? I, as a believer, am responsible for myself first, right? To God, right? I have to, because just like in the airplane, if I don't have my mask on, I can't help you. So if I'm allowing myself to be in a situation that's breaking me down, breaking down my health, breaking down what is those principles that God has given for well-being, which are total, right? My physical well-being, my financial well-being, my social well-being, right? Those things are all important. What are the principles that we can find to let us know that we are making a good decision, we have the right things in place, and if not, finding therapists, coaches, trained clergy people that can help us identify those. The clergy person that kept telling her, just go back, forgive him, just go back. That person needed training. They might have been an excellent pastor, but they may have needed more training as it pertains to the relationship dynamic and what is God actually saying when he's talking about divorce.
Very, very good point. And Carrie's already telling me that Mia needs to come back again, and I totally agree on that.
Yeah.
So, but we still have so much else.
Keep on,
to
and
discuss.
Nina, stay on our points. Make sure that we hit all of our points, because I know that we got a thing. So keep rolling so we can get through all our beautiful points.
Yeah.
I'm sorry I made everybody, skip off the
So,
point too.
and I
but
think we've, oops.
No, you were on point,
Okay,
Ronnie,
so-
because we were talking about that's actually one of the points, is talking about, myths surrounding forgiveness. So we're on track. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
So,
All right.
is there more you want to say about myths around forgiveness, or do you feel like you've?
Well, I wanted to
Go ahead.
cycle back a little bit. I wanted to cycle back just a little bit about, what we believe matters, right? And this, I don't know about you all and viewers that are watching this or will watch this, but I did not realize how many toxic beliefs I had about God and about myself. So, Nina, you brought up the fact that, yes, my sister was actually abducted. And when they found her, she was left for dead on the side of a road, right? And that was extremely traumatizing. Now, I was a believer at that point. And so what we believe matters. I wrestled with the idea that God could allow something like that, because my sister was a kid. She wasn't an adult. She was a child. See what I'm saying? And when it unfolded, all that happened to her, I could not wrap my mind around God actually being able to allow this to happen. However, I thought that if I questioned God about this, that I would be being an unbeliever, that I would somehow be disrespecting God. Here's another thing. What you believe matters, spirituality, right? Lies believed break the circle of love and trust. So one lie, so thinking about what lies might I be believing that are keeping me in a situation that's not good, even if the situation is in my mind. So I believed that I could not ask God questions about the situation. I believed that it was wrong to question and have doubts, right? And then I also believed that, lies believed. I believed that, oh, my family must be cursed to the third and fourth generations, right? Oh my goodness, what generation am I in? Is this going to happen to me? Is this going to happen to my children? And that's what landed me in the hospital. This idea that God's not for me, he's against me, to the third and fourth generation, a misunderstanding of biblical principles, of biblical information.
Right.
And now I'm loving God with my whole heart. I love him and I want to be with him, but I believe that, well, his hands are tied. This is just what has to happen because he said it, of not understanding that there's so much more to that whole concept and idea, okay? And so that's what I want to challenge people that are watching this today. I want to challenge you to really investigate. Hey, am I in a situation right now that's unhealthy? Am I under distress? And is it possible that any of my spiritual or biblical or religious beliefs, because there may be people here, maybe Christianity is not your faith base, but you are a religious person. Is it possible, though, that even in the tradition that you may be in, there are things that you're believing that could be toxic? Yeah.
I don't know. As you're saying this, I'm throwing back to something in my own life.
Yeah.
When one of my children was born with a genetic liver disease, needed a transplant to survive, and was in and out of the hospital, mostly in, for the last 6 months of his life. And I was there with him, and you can imagine the stress of that, waiting, will transplant come through? This was back in the 1980s, y'all. So transplants were still considered very experimental then. There weren't that many people that even knew it was possible. And so the chances of him getting the liver were not good, even though he was number one on the list. So, and I remember there being people who came to me and, their intentions were good,
Right.
but they came to me and said, if you had more faith,
Mm.
then God would heal your
Mm-hmm.
child. This would not be happening to
Oh,
you.
Lord.
The trauma of
Yeah.
thinking, oh my goodness, this might be my fault because my faith is not good
Right.
enough.
Right.
Or
Right.
the idea that, oh, you must have done something wrong for
Right.
this child to, God is the one who determines what your genes are, and God must be mad at you, or he wouldn't have had these genes come together in
Mm-hmm.
this child. So, that's a lot that gets heaped on you.
Yes.
And if you have beliefs that are not true about who God is and what his intentions are,
Right.
that just adds to the
Yes.
trauma.
There you go, Nina.
And it's not the kind of trauma you can, get out from under. It's not like you have a choice. That's your child.
Right.
You're not going to leave your child and say, oh, well, I'll just have to let somebody else take care of him.
Mm-mm.
No, because
Mm-hmm.
then your conscience would be burdening you about the fact that I left this child who was in distress and, needed me. And I left for selfish reasons because I didn't want to have to deal with it. So obviously you're not going to do that, but it's not something you can get out from under. So what is it that we need to be believing about God in situations like these,
That's so beautiful.
that would put us in a better place and help us understand that we're carrying a burden that we don't need to carry?
Oh, I'm so glad you brought that in, Nina, and I'm so grateful. Thank you for your transparency and sharing that, because that's exactly what you said. That's exactly what I'm talking about. The idea that now here come believers to say,
Mm-hmm.
you need more faith, or if only you would believe. And now that's left with you. Like, well, is that true? And so
Yeah.
what happens is the peace that I could have had through this nightmare
Yes.
is
Yes.
tested, or it's taken away, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because especially there are people who experience just what you said, and the person telling them is the pastor or some
Right.
key leader in the church, right? Or somebody that they have
Mm-hmm.
faith in that is sharing this information. And even if it isn't, it's like a dagger. And so
Yeah.
what
That's
can
right.
we be believing about? What can we be believing? What's the principle
Right.
that helps us is knowing that God is good. God
That's
is
right.
good. And if he's good, then he's all good. And there is no darkness in him. So then where's this
That's
darkness
right.
coming from? Where is this pain coming from?
Mhm.
Who is actually responsible for this? Well, Satan. He is the father of lies. He cannot do anything but tell
That's
lies.
right.
He's not even
Mhm.
capable of telling
Mm-hmm.
anything else but a lie, right? And he can make it look
Mhm.
spiritual,
Mm-hmm.
like, if you had more faith. It makes me think
Mm-hmm.
about is it Joni or Jonai? Jonai Erickson Tata. She talks about it.
Johnny is the
Mm-hmm.
way she pronounces it. Yeah.
Joni Erickson Tata. She talked about the same thing. She
Mm-hmm.
said she went to so many healing services. She so many people
Mm-hmm.
anointing her head with oil, slaying her in the
Mhm.
spirit, all these things. And she's still in a wheelchair to this day, right? And she's like, if that's the
Right.
case, what more can I do? And so on top of the trial is this burden, this idea that God is not with me. But the truth is,
Mm-hmm.
God said, I will never leave you nor forsake you, right?
Forsake
He
you.
said that.
Mhm.
Even
He
till the end
didn't
of
say
time.
that. He also said, in this life, we will have tribulation. He
Mm-hmm.
said,
Mhm.
but I'm
That's right.
with you, right? And so
Yeah.
we
Mm-hmm.
know the truth. So the devil says, if you were more Christ-like, if you loved God more, if only you believed more, this
Right.
wouldn't be happening. But the truth is, Jesus said, I will have tribulation. But he also said he will never leave me nor forsake me. If I have to close my loved one's eyes in death, God is even there with me. He is there with
Yes.
me.
You
And
know,
he knows what
you
that
know,
feels like.
Mia,
He can help
Yeah.
you
me.
know, and
Could I
Mia,
say one more thing,
the one.
Rodney?
Sure,
Could
go
I say
ahead, Mia.
one more
Go
thing
ahead.
on that? And please
Sure.
don't forget your thought. Please don't.
I won't. I won't.
One of the most comforting things about the cross to me, because people
Mm-hmm.
bring up the cross, Jesus has been through this, so you can go through it. And they used to anger me. I'm
Mm-hmm.
like, But what I
Right.
love about the cross is where Jesus actually says, my God, why have you forsaken me? He says that. That's
Mm-hmm.
one of his last words. And we know Jesus was perfect. He was sinless,
Mm-hmm.
right? And he's not sinning
Mm-hmm.
by asking that question. He is not.
That's right.
And
Yeah.
that's how
Mm-hmm.
I know he really can help me, because he knows what it feels like to feel like God, the very one I depend on for everything, is not there.
Mm-hmm.
And God let it be
Right.
noted in the Bible so that when I reach that time in my life where I feel like things are so painful that I just
Mm-hmm.
got to be sure God's not here, and I ask the question,
Mm-hmm.
Jesus did that. And therefore
Right.
he can help me in that situation. Does that make sense?
Mhm.
Yeah. Makes
No,
sense.
and I think that's so important that we don't put that additional burden on ourselves of
Mm-hmm.
trying to fool ourselves about what we really feel or what
Yes.
we really think.
Mm-hmm.
You know, when we try to tell ourselves, "Oh, I shouldn't be angry about that because that's going against
Mm-hmm.
God. I don't want to go against God." But deep down inside, we really do feel angry. And you know what? God
Yes.
isn't fooled. He
No.
is not fooled. He
Mm-hmm.
sees that even if we don't. And he's like, I want you to tell it to me. I
Yes.
want you to
Mm-hmm.
admit it. I want you to say, because actually, our feelings are not sinful. None
No.
of our feelings are sinful.
Right.
They're actually just signals,
Yes.
signs
Mm-hmm.
to us of what is really going on
What are we
inside of us.
thinking?
And we need, yes, and we need to pay attention to them.
Absolutely. Because if I'm not aware of my thoughts,
Me and
then
me and my mhm.
I was just
Me, I just wanted to ask, the thing is a lot of times people as people are getting, people are going to church, they might have issues and things like that. And what I'm seeing more so is flawed churches
mm,
and flawed doctrine that is running people off the rails. And I really think that's a big problem. And just like in the Bible, it says don't add or subtract any words from the Bible. And people start getting into these interpretations and, well, how I feel, I think people need to keep it on the word, and stop putting their opinion into it, because that's where people start making these slides. They could say, well, I kind of feel this way, instead of really keeping it on biblical truth, accept it for what it is. I read it in black and white. And so I don't know, me personally, I don't go against it. And like I said, I've had people die. I lost my mom when I was just 18. Would
wow.
I, and sometimes, of course I miss her terribly, but am I going to be bitter? Am I going to, raise up against God? No. There's a reason for all of these things, and the strength. And so what I did was draw on every wonderful thing that my mom taught me to
Yes.
build me up, give me strength. And sometimes, things happen suddenly. See, that's the difference. Sometimes people pass away and it's so sudden. It's a car accident, it's some type of traumatic thing, or some illness that kind of rolls up and takes a person. I think that rather than buffet and kind of go up against God, we really need to accept what is, and try to understand that, it's not my fault, it's not someone else's fault, and that's where we have to really trust the will of God. And I think that a lot
Mhm.
of people um, go up against the will of God.
Well, I wanted to say, and I love that you're bringing this into the discussion, because here's a big principle that I see in the
Mm-hmm.
Bible, and biblical, but
Mm-hmm.
sometimes you're reading the word and you've been indoctrinated or trained to see things a certain way.
Mm-hmm.
Even though I'm reading the truth and the principle, I might miss
Mm-hmm.
it because my community or my family has always taught this
Mm-hmm.
same biblical truth this way,
Mm-hmm.
right? But
Right.
there's two things that the scriptures show me. It says the Bereans. There's a in the New Testament, it said the Bereans, they studied daily to see if these things were so, right? So somebody was
Right.
sharing things with them, but they didn't just take what the person said. And I pray that people won't just take what I say, but you'll actually go back, right? And see,
Mm-hmm.
here goes another principle that's in the Bible. It's okay to not be okay. Ooh,
Right.
it's okay to not be
Yeah.
okay. It really is.
Mm-hmm.
The Ecclesiastes chapter 3 says there's a time for everything. There is a
Mhm.
time for everything, and it
And
goes
a
through
season for everything.
a season under the sun, right? And so
Mm-hmm.
it shows us that these things happen. Here's another one. Even
Mm-hmm.
people in the Bible who are huge biblical heroes, we would say, they had seasons of doubt. They had seasons of
Mhm.
distrust. They had seasons
Mm-hmm.
of questioning. That's why I brought in that Jesus said, my God, why have you forsaken me?" Because if anyone's a Bible
Mm-hmm.
hero, and if anyone's
Mhm.
an example, it's God, right? It's Jesus,
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
and
Yep.
he allowed himself to let that come from his mouth because he
Mm-hmm.
knew his children down the line, down the ages, would have experiences like that. And they were going to need
Right.
to know that he can help them when they feel that way, right?
Mhm.
Job is a huge
Mhm.
example of that. He asked lots of questions. He all throughout the
Mm-hmm.
book of Job is like, why am I even alive? Why am I even here?
Mhm.
And even
Mhm.
though he was faithful, he said, God is given and God is taken away. Blessed be the name of the Lord. Someone can also see the things of Job and say that, hey, he is actually
Mhm.
questioning. Because for you to say that the day that I was born is a mistake, who is that to?
Mhm.
Because who's
Yeah.
responsible for the day of your birth?
Mm-hmm.
You?
Yeah.
No, it's God,
Yeah.
right?
No.
So
Mm-hmm.
And David in
Wow.
the Psalms, we see it, how long, O Lord, how long? We see it in Revelation, the martyrs that are
Mm-hmm.
under the throne. How long,
yes,
O Lord?
yes,
Yeah.
yes.
So,
So
Mm-hmm.
it's okay to not be okay. And there's some people, we're all built differently. Things happen. Like,
Mm-hmm.
let's say people get in a fight and one person's like, wow, that was a good hit. They got me good. Another person's like, I can't believe they hit me. Can't believe they put their hands on my body. We're all
Mm-hmm.
made different. Our brains are all made differently. We don't have to have
Mm-hmm.
shame for how we respond to the trials of this life. What we can know for sure, without a shadow of a doubt, is that wherever we are in the journey of healing, that's okay and that God is with us. He said
mhm.
himself, he's the author and the finisher of our faith. The author
Mm-hmm.
means you created it, you thought of it, you put it to, you have the plan, and you're the finisher, right? And so I believe that's really important because I think a lot of people walk away from God, including myself at one time in my life or multiple times in the past, right? Because I did not realize that no, it's okay to not be okay. It's okay to question. It's okay to
Mhm.
ask those hard questions of God because when you don't ask the question, you may not be able to get the answer because your mind's not open to the fact that an answer
Mm-hmm.
can come. Even,
Mhm.
and I'm not trying to promote this idea that God answers all questions. I'm just promoting the idea that it's okay to ask them, right? And
Mm-hmm.
to
Mhm.
trust that whatever comes
Mm-hmm.
back is not going to be just this rebuke, but
Right.
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 love and guidance for the journey, so
Mm-hmm.
that I can keep walking with you and trusting you.
Yes.
Right.
Yes. And I saw that happen when my son was sick because I was questioning.
Mm-hmm.
God, what are you doing? What is going on here? Why is this happening? And what are you going to do with my son? I wanted the assurance that my son was going to live, and yet
Mm-hmm.
I wasn't getting it, you know.
Wow.
And I remember there came a point where uh, I started seeing things started leaping out of the scripture at me that
Mm-hmm.
God remembers our frame and he knows that we're just dust, you
Yes.
know, and he will not uh, break a bruised reed. And so I was
Mm-hmm.
like, God, you really do see me. You understand what I'm going through. So,
Mm-hmm.
but I'm wanting to know why you're not answering my questions. And one day something happened that helped me see it. And what
Mm-hmm.
that was my son was frequently getting shots or having blood taken or whatever. And every
Mm-hmm.
time they did that, they would give him a band-aid, right? To cover up where they had just pricked. But he would not take any of the band-aids off. So every day he was getting new ones. He'd have them all around his fingers, having them striped up at, both arms, and he would be wearing
Mm-hmm.
all of them. And one day
Mm-hmm.
the nurse comes in to give him a vitamin K shot, and because he had a liver disease, he needed that. And
Mm-hmm.
he started crying immediately because he knew what was going to happen. And he started saying, I want a band aid. I want a band aid. And,
Mm-hmm.
but he had learned to hold still for when they did it, because he was like, if he didn't hold still, if he jerked, the needle would come out. They'd have to stick him a second time because they had to do
Right.
it. Well, he didn't
Wow.
understand what all that was for, but I remember that day that when she got done and she gave him the Band-Aid, he looked up at her with tears running down his cheeks and he said, "Thank you." And right at that moment, God speaks to me and he says, "Nina, that's the way I want you to be with me." And suddenly I realized my son didn't even understand what his liver was or what it did or why it was so important.
Mhm.
He didn't understand why he needed a vitamin K shot. And he was 3 years old. If I had explained it to him,
Oh.
he was still not going to understand it.
That's so
And
perfect.
God was telling
Mhm.
me, he said, "Nina, my ways are far above your ways, past finding
Right.
out. And even though I share with you as much as I can, there's so
Mhm.
much that you just cannot
Yes.
comprehend,
Nope.
that you
Nope.
cannot grasp.
Nope.
And
Mhm.
therefore, it wouldn't matter if I tried to tell you what was going on or not, because you still wouldn't get it.
Yeah.
And yet, just as your son is able to trust, not, it's okay for him to cry
Yes.
when he knows he's about to get hurt. It's
Yes.
okay for him to not
Mhm.
want it to happen. But when it is all over, he has trusted even through the process. He held still for it. He trusted that
Mhm.
what they were doing and what you're doing, that you're allowing them to do this to you. He trusted your love for him.
Yes.
He
Mhm.
trusted that their intentions are all good for him. And when it's over, he said, "Thank you for it,"
Yes. Yes.
even when he didn't
Mhm.
understand. And when I realized, oh God, you know, that's what I need to be doing. That's what you want from me.
Yes.
You want me
Mm.
to say yes to you. You want me to say thank you to you at the end, even when I don't understand, and trust your heart toward me, even if I don't understand your actions toward me.
That's perfect. Perfectly put. Absolutely perfectly put. I love what you
Mm.
said about the fact that your son is 3 years old. Even if you try to explain to him, "Honey, this is what's going on, baby, da da da," he wouldn't understand it. But what he could
No.
understand was that mommy loves you, that
Mhm.
mommy loves you, and mommy's here for you. And one day things won't be like this. And I
Right.
believe that's really why I'm a Christian too. It's like it's the promise that I know you didn't want this to happen. I know you don't want this to happen, what's coming, but know that my ways are truly past finding out. Like you said,
Mhm.
he said that to his disciples, right? He said, "I have many things to say to you, but
Mhm.
you cannot bear them now." Right? There are
Right.
many things I
Right.
want to say to you, but you cannot bear them now. And so God in his infinite wisdom,
Mhm.
he has it. And that's a huge part of regaining our mental health, because we actually have to go on day by day, not knowing
Mhm.
what is next,
Mhm.
but not needing to know actually,
Yeah. Yeah.
right? But what we
Yeah. And
Mhm.
I was just going to say, and
Mm.
it's okay for us to grieve
Yes.
over
Right.
the things that we lose, the things that happen to us,
Mhm.
it's sorrowful. It's all
Yes.
right to grieve that. But as you had
Mia?
mentioned to me, Mia, there is good
Mhm.
grief and bad grief.
Yes.
So what is the difference?
Right.
Oh,
Um,
Mia, I had one question too. You're in the mental health space. A lot of times people have a tendency to not want to take medication. Sometimes people say, well, if the Lord is healing you, you wouldn't need this medication. Is there a balance between counseling and get that, if you have depression and you need uh, some kind of supplemental help by a medication, how do you balance that and how do you explain that to your patient?
Beautiful. I'm gonna weave in principal answers to both things that you brought up. So with Nina, she's
Mhm.
talking about, you know, good grief versus bad grief is something really important. And this medication thing, what's up with that? As a Christian, as a believer. And
Right,
so,
right.
so good grief, bad grief. What if I need to take a pill to go to sleep because I've lost someone I love and I can't get to sleep? Right? Let's leave it. I'm gonna bind it together. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So number one, we
Mm-hmm.
know that when we lose a loved one or we lose something, because grief can happen even if we haven't, had to bury someone or
Mm-hmm.
something, right? We can have grief over
Mm-hmm.
loss of a job, grief over a relationship not working out. I'm going to speak specifically
True.
about the loss of a loved one because it's happened to all of us, right? And so with the loss of a loved one, we think about impact. This is how we can know if good grief is turning into bad grief, is impact. So of course, the idea is, am I able to show up for my for life? For instance, when we lose a loved one, we have to consider that it's an amputation. Consider it as an amputation. I have lost, let's say, an amputation of my leg or both my legs, right? This loss is an amputation. I have to now figure out how to live without my leg, right?
A new normal. Yeah.
Right. There's a new normal, and my leg's not coming back. I might even get a prosthesis eventually down the line, but even for that, my leg has to be ready to receive that, right? And a prosthesis still is not my leg, right?
Right.
And so we understand that there's a time of healing in losing, I'm putting it that way, in losing my leg, where I may need medication because of the pain of the loss of a leg, right? I may need physical therapy because I have to learn how to walk with one leg until I get a prosthesis. And if I'm not able to afford a prosthesis, some people are not candidates for prosthesis. So I have to now learn how to live my regular life that I was used to. And so I may need different types of support. So those of us who've lost a loved one, we may need to be in a counseling group. We may need individual therapy. We may need extra care. Like if I lost my leg, now I need to I need to have a handicap space because I'm not parking at the back of the, grocery place anymore. I need special care. And I might need that special care the rest of my life, right? Because my leg's not coming back. And that's good grief. That's okay. But good grief is understanding that, hey, I have some special needs now because of this loss. I have some things that are no longer, like some expectations even that maybe I could have been expected to have before. It's different now, right? Because I've had an amputation. Okay, where it becomes bad grief is where I'm still trying to live as though I've not had the amputation. Right? I'm trying to I may be I may be trying to show up in life and have expectations of myself that are unrealistic to the situation I've experienced, right? And how is it affecting now my daily life and my daily relationships? Because there is going to be an effect when I have amputation. I'm going to have a lot of anger, a lot of frustration, a lot of questions. I possibly may grieve my leg the rest of my life. How would I not? Right? But it may look different, and so I may not be crying every day. Maybe I only cry once a week, or I might be, instead of crying for hours, I maybe just cry 1 hour, am I progressing? Am I able to, so you asked the question, am I able to start to progress towards a life that is a new normal where I can show up, I can take care of myself, I can do things, even though it's different, it's painful, it's hard, but I'm able to show up in life. I'm able to do the things that I need to have to take care of myself, right? Does that make sense? Is that clear?
Oh, yeah. Yeah. And I love that you even mentioned that you might need special care the rest of your life because that loss still affects you the rest of your life. So, but that doesn't mean that, grief has a way of making us, I don't know, dysfunctional for a while because the loss is so great. It's so painful. So there should come a season eventually when we have actually worked through the grief that we become more functional. That doesn't mean that we stop hurting.
Right.
And it doesn't mean that grief is over,
Right.
because, we might be grieving the rest of our lives.
Yes.
But good grief means we get to a place where we can be functional again. We can show up again for other people in a way that we weren't able to before.
Yes.
I do believe, though, there's a myth, and I'd love for you to talk about this, Mia. I've talked to so many people who have lost a husband or lost a child. A year later, they're thinking, I should be over this by now. I shouldn't be crying anymore. I should be, I should have stopped thinking about them by now, or stopped wishing they were still here. And I don't think that's true. I think we add those burdens to ourselves by expecting too much.
And absolutely. And I just love the way you put that. That's so true. And that's where that bad grief can kind of come in, where I have these expectations that are unrealistic. So many times people don't consider grief as an amputation. But if we just took a time to marinate in that idea, we would see that I'm not going to expect a person who's lost a leg to be running and jogging, right? Which would be the equivalent of trying to say that, hey, or running and jogging without assistance, without specific assistance that got them to that point where it actually took time. A person that gets a prosthetic leg, even, right, which could fill in the blank, whatever that looks like for a person, even needs time to learn how to utilize that, right? How to utilize it properly.
Yeah.
So there's a time for everything, right? And
Mia, I had one thing, a lot of times for me, I think what happens is a lot of times people don't understand that God wants everybody to have a personal relationship with him, not listen to what your family says, not really even key in so much on your pastor, because pastors have been flawed, doctrines have been flawed, things that people are teaching is flawed. I really believe that where the Lord is really wanting to reach out to people is that personal one-on-one relationship. Ask him, find out from him, wait, get those answers for him, pray that he gives you that divine answer that you need, rather than but in association with you, of course, and of course being able to have your mental health with that Christian edge that you bring, that substance, that base. I think that a lot of times people they miss the value of that personal one-on-one relationship and say, Lord, why do I feel this way? Talk to me. How can I get these answers? And to patiently wait.
And that's why I love This Way Network. That's why I love the show that you all are doing, because when we think about it, God speaks to us in various ways, right? And God heals in various ways, even going back to the medication part that you spoke about. So some people are against medication, but they don't realize that, hey, what if, would you be against medication if, hey, I need to have a C-section? Is it wrong for me to get medication to have that C-section? They're going to cut my body open and they're going to pull a baby out of my flesh, and I'm not going to take any medication, right? And then I'm going to heal from that without medication. Well, what if some of the pain that I'm experiencing is similar to a C-section, where, hey, my brain is not even making the chemicals and the proteins and the things that are needed to buffer me against this situation? What if my brain, when I was born, lacks certain structures or things that are needed, and the only way that I can get that is through a medication or through a procedure that's going to help me, right? But I'm not taking it. So now I'm not having wellness. Even God, Jesus, when he healed the blind man, right? He had been born blind from his youth. And the people were like, who sinned, him or his parents? And he's like, neither.
Right.
This was for the glory of God. When he healed that man, he used clay from the ground and spit. But he could have just said, be healed, like he had done for other people. So there are so many different ways that God can actually heal. And my challenge to us, because I know our time is running out, is that let us engage in the idea that healing is a journey and not just an event.
Yes.
Right.
a journey
Yes.
with different nuances and not just boom, I'm healed, I'm delivered, I'm done, that's over.
Mhm.
Yeah. And really
Wow.
not
And
a
Mia, give your
destination.
website, Mia. Mia, give your website
Yeah.
for anybody watching if they want to learn more about you, because Nina, we're almost at the end. Oh,
We are.
My
Okay, tell us.
Yes, it's painunwasted.org. Painunwasted.org. Another way, if you want to get in touch with me, it's miapile.com. That's my virtual business card. Miapile.com. Okay. So you can definitely get in touch with me from that business card as well.
wow.
And we put that up there too. Give me a second there.
Yep.
There we go.
There you go.
All right, awesome. Now, when you come back, and hopefully that will be soon. So I'm going to get with you about the next
Sure.
date. But can we talk more about grief? Because I think there's so much more
Absolutely.
to be
Mhm.
said about this and
Absolutely.
about ways that we can facilitate going through it.
Absolutely.
That's what I would love to talk about.
And I want us to go through some actual strategies, right? Because don't you get frustrated when you hear
Mhm.
people saying you need to
Yes.
do this? Okay, how?
Yes.
Mhm.
How? So
Yeah.
there's
Yeah.
actual strategies that we can discuss that people can do in real time. You know, they can do it for themselves right then
Mhm.
and there. So I want to let's weave that back into when we come again.
And next time save a little window for me, because what I'm hearing all around me is fear. And the Lord has not given us a spirit of fear. And people are like, oh, what are we going to do? The gas price is $7. Oh, this and that. And everybody, and I look
Yeah.
at people and I'm like, you know, what's all this fear about? I'm like, we have to, we're here. It ain't like we're on another planet. We're all here together. We can get through these things working together. So I
Yeah.
hope
And you'd
you
be
can address.
surprised.
Mhm.
Yeah.
A
You'd
lot
be
of fear.
surprised too, Rodney, how much fear has to do with grief.
Ooh, that's
They
so
are
Right.
they
good.
are so
Yes,
linked.
that's so
Yeah.
true.
So linked.
Mhm.
That's so true.
Honest. Well, and we have to go. I hate it, but we
Yeah.
have to go. So thank you everyone for
Well,
joining
thank you
us
to all
this
the
morning.
viewers out there.
Yeah, we
Go,
love you
Nina. Go
all.
ahead.
And be of good courage.
Yes.
God is with us, and we are not alone.
Yes.
Bye, everybody.